The record. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan Summit. My name is Dr. Morgan Crossman, and I am the Executive Director at Building Bright Futures, and we are thrilled to have you today. We're excited to be talking about celebrating every accomplishment that this network has really moved forward over the past year. It's also a time to reflect on all of the different components of the work at each layer of our network infrastructure and kick off a new year of priority setting and starting the process to develop State Advisory Council recommendations. I want to start today's session by saying thank you to each and every one of you for your commitment to strengthening our early childhood system in Vermont and really working to improve the well-being of Vermont's children from the prenatal period through age 8 and their families. As Vermonters, we recognize the importance of strong relationships, of breaking down silos to really figure out how we support equitable access to services, resources, and supports, and promote optimal outcomes for each and every young child and their family. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that the first 3 years of life is the most critical period of child development. It's a time where the architecture of the growing brain is established and all of the different patterns of behavior are created. We know that the family, the community, and the entire early childhood system really set the stage for longer term social, emotional, and cognitive development. And focusing on this early childhood period is the best prevention strategy that we have. Recognizing the importance of the early childhood years, in 2013, Governor Shumlin's administration originally championed the Vermont Early Childhood Framework. And the purpose of that work was to unify Vermonters in all of the efforts to focus on ensuring the well-being of Vermont's young children and their families. The original Early Childhood Action Plan, or the ECAP, had 6 key goals to make sure that the framework was realized. And it was really about reflecting shared responsibility for the well-being of Vermont's children and families. And that framework laid the groundwork for this collaborative approach to building a comprehensive, integrated early childhood system that promotes healthy development and family stability. It also articulated for the first time some common goals and began to create some common language around and across disciplines. So now that you've heard a little bit about the history of our early childhood strategic plan, I want to turn it over to Cheryl Wilcox, who's the co-chair of our State Advisory Council, to talk about the creation of the 2020 Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Just going to do a read on people's faces. You can all hear me, audio is working. It's always a good way to start, right? So I am really happy to be here. I am the public co-chair of the State Advisory Council. I work for the Department of Mental Health. I've been on the Building Bright Futures State Advisory Council for several years now, and it has been wonderful to see the evolution of this work. In 2020, it goes without saying, equity and access became prominent priorities for the VCAP. With this, VCAP was updated through an extensive 2-year process. There was incredible participation of over 300 stakeholders, and that was across family members, our community partners, mental health organizations, parent-child centers, just the list goes on of the folks that came to the table to really update this so we could identify the gaps, challenges, and barriers that are being faced by Vermont's children, families, and early childhood system. As these gaps emerged, and in many cases widened from those we knew already existed, objective strategies and outcomes were prioritized in the strategic plan. This iteration of the plan holds true to the values outlined in the original framework and ECAP. The VCAP is designed to build collective accountability to achieve measurable 2026 goals. It's also designed to evolve based on new evidence, best practices, lessons learned, and improved analytics through the identification and measurement of child, family, and system indicators. Our goal is to ensure every Vermonter is able to see themselves and their work represented with this strategic plan. The VCAP articulates a strengthened vision for Vermont's children and families. Vermont aspires to realize the promise of each and every Vermont child by ensuring the early childhood system is an integrated, continuous, comprehensive, high-quality system of services that is equitable, accessible, and will improve outcomes for children in the prenatal period to age 8. So now that is an amazing goal and one that is exciting to see so many folks coming together. Over many decades, countless early childhood champions have built, invested in, and contributed to a stronger system for our children. I see many of you here today, and I feel incredibly lucky to know and work with so many of you. Strong leaders in communities, public and private early education programs, schools, businesses, nonprofits, advocacy, our state government, philanthropy, and many others have ensured the sustainability of our system. Consequently, Vermont's current early childhood system is robust, including services, supports, and resources in physical and mental health, early care, education, home visiting, nutrition, family support services, disability services, and much more. Despite our efforts, not all children and families are able to access what they need to thrive, and our system is underfunded. Our work to this point has been really important, and we know we still have much more work to do. With the publishing of the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, we ask you and all Vermonters to affirm this vision by creating positive change in the early childhood system. Together, I am confident we will implement this strategic plan and hold each other accountable to the goals, objectives, strategies, and outcomes identified, and commit to the vision we've laid out. I'm so glad that you all joined us today and are supporting this incredible work for the children and families of our state. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's really great to have everyone here with us today. And for those of you who have been a part of BBF meetings over the past year, we've started a practice of holding a mindful moment at the beginning of our meetings. So what we've realized is so often, so many of us forget to take a deep breath or to pause. And so I really want to ask this group, the 105 people on the call today, to bring our energy down, to recenter, and allow me to walk through a mindfulness visualization. So I want to invite each of you to turn off your video, close your eyes, sit up very tall, feet on the floor, hands on your thighs. And I want you to feel your heels, your toes, the bottoms of your feet, and feel the bottoms of your hands resting on your thighs. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. Breathe in and breathe out. As you breathe in again, take a little bit longer to exhale. Now take a moment to picture a baby. In the year 2026, a child is born to a family in Vermont. We will call her baby Mariah. Vermont's a state where all children and families are accepted for who they are, and we support this child from the very start, all the way through their development and their education. This child thrives with the loving care of her parents and caregivers. Her family is safe and stable in their home and has food in their fridge today and on the horizon. Baby Mariah's parents use paid family leave and home visiting to support the physical and mental health of both parents and baby. The family is connected to their diverse community and can access services, resources, and supports they need, including but not limited to high quality childcare, a faith community, mental health support, healthy food, and jobs. Mariah grows into a toddler, preschooler, and eventually transitions to the local elementary school. She's resilient to navigate even the most difficult days that she'll face. Mariah does not yet know that there's a community holding her and her family through a seamless system of support. This is a system where all children have a healthy start, where families and communities play a leading role in children's well-being, where families have access to high quality opportunities that meet their needs, and where the early childhood system is integrated, well-resourced, and data informed. This is the future. So now I want to invite you to open your eyes, turn your video back on, and hold on to this image and this community of supports that's surrounding Mariah and her family as we work through our time together today and really working towards this ultimate vision. So we're going to pull down the screen share now and do a round of introductions across the room. I'm going to remove the spotlight here. So what we want folks to remember is that the Building Bright Futures Network is not the 10-person team that sits in the Williston office and across the state of Vermont, but that the Building Bright Futures Network is made up of over 450 partners across the state who are really committed to supporting children and families. So we do want to do a quick poll activity to capture who's in the virtual room with us. So I'd like to ask Beth to share that poll and for folks to quickly identify which layer of the BBF network you're a part of. So whether you're part of a regional council, a VCAP committee, or a state advisory council member, or another group that we haven't mentioned here. Which AHS region of Vermont do you live in? And I see that people are able to access this, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And for those who don't have access to be able to complete the poll, if you're able to write in the chat a virtual introduction, please go ahead and do that. All right, so as we are finishing up this poll, it's really exciting to see folks across every single layer of the infrastructure and from every AHS district represented on the call today. So thank you all for being here. We're thrilled to have you. I do want to ask that if you are able to turn on your camera, please do. And I want to do a kind of virtual show of hands, say hey, to see who's here with us. So if you are involved in one of our 12 early childhood regional councils, either wave, say hi, unmute yourself, or high five, or give a thumbs up on the screen. Nice
Hi.
to see you. All right. If you are involved in one of our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees, and those are Child Outcomes Accountability Team, Early Learning and Development, Families and Communities, Professional Preparation and Development, Data and Evaluation, Early Childhood Interagency Coordinating Team, or Early Childhood Investment. Now I'd like to see your wave, hands, high fives. Awesome to see everyone. All right. If you are a member of the BBF Early Childhood State Advisory Council, it's your turn to unmute, wave, high five on the screen. Great to see you folks. All right, if you are a member of our community partners or another invested stakeholder who really cares about kids and families in Vermont that we have not heard from yet, I would love to hear a hi, raise your hand, or high five. Hi, folks. It's cool to see the virtual tiles shift as well. So it's nice to see everyone today. All right. Well, now that we've kind of seen who is in the virtual room again, feel free throughout today's session, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat bar. For those on the phone, I understand that's a little bit challenging, but for anyone who would like to introduce themselves, feel free to do it in the chat bar. You can write your name, your institutional affiliation, and anything else you'd like folks to know about your participation. So now I'm going to transition it over to Beth, who is our Deputy Director, to talk a little bit more about our updated VCAP.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be together in our virtual space. I'm Beth Truzansky. I'm the Deputy Director for Building Bright Futures, and my work is to coordinate across all levels of the BBF network and to ensure our work is guided by the VCAP. We have invited a few early childhood leaders to share a few exciting examples of how we've made progress at different levels of the infrastructure and toward VCAP goals. And I have a graphic up on the screen which really demonstrates the nested nature that we know children and families grow up in. And we have invited people to share stories that really represent how we are supporting kids and families at all different levels. So I would like to start with partners from the Northeast Kingdom who have joined us. Goal 1 states that all children have a healthy start. Supporting families to meet their basic needs is a priority for many of our regional councils, including our council in Orleans and Northern Essex. And we have Samantha Stevens, who's the Equity and Community Outreach Coordinator for the North Country Supervisory Union, and Suzanne Laguerre-Belcher, who's the Field Services Director with the Newport and St. Johnsbury districts, to share a little bit about the hard work that they've been doing to support children and families to access the resources that they need. Sam and Suzanne, if you want to unmute and share
Great.
a little bit about your work in the region.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Samantha and I are delighted to share some of the projects that we've been doing. One of the projects really started because we, as a region, got together during COVID and began a response and recovery team. And with that brought 25 to 50 people around the region. And they came from the business community, the health community, community partners, volunteers, schools, hospitals, all of that. And it was just terrific. And we, Samantha and I were reflecting about what brought all this together. And we were really surprised just with meeting virtually. It really, really brought people together and we stayed together. We really noticed the inequities in terms of what families and children were exposed to and who got what was needed and who didn't. And one of the projects that developed from one of the teams that became a subgroup of the Newport Response Recovery Team was the Orleans Northern Essex, we called it the Delivery Food Program. And then Samantha will talk about that. One of the other pieces that I wanted to highlight was something that did get started before COVID, but just kept its wheels going. And that was Children of Incarcerated Parents Project. So Samantha, do you want to talk about the O&E one?
Sure. Thank you, Suzanne, and I'm glad to be here with all of you today. I think Suzanne and I were really lucky to be a part of a community that, like many in Vermont, leaned in when COVID began. And I think for all of us who were at the table early on and throughout the pandemic, or the beginning of the pandemic, because we're not done yet, I think our focus really was on what do children need to come out of this with resilience and stability as we enter a recovery period, which we hope we're coming on to, if not entering now. So one of the things that we decided to build on was a grocery delivery program that was begun to support students who were McKinney-Vento eligible through the school system. So those are students who are experiencing homelessness. And I started to do that last spring when I realized that a lot of families didn't have access to food. But we recognized a need to continue it because there were many families who were not able to access food resources because of a lack of transportation in our rural community, or there were other social barriers that were preventing them from accessing things like the food shelf or using their 3 squares at the grocery store. So we created a pilot program with several partners, including the Green Mountain United Way, NECA, Suzanne is our local field service coordinator, the North Country Supervisory Union, who am I forgetting? We've had some rural community transportation as a key partner who has brought in also a volunteer driver for that program. And the purpose behind the program was to create a system that increases food access by providing groceries and educational materials to families with children in rural areas of the Northeast and Northwest Orleans County. So we're now serving 9 families with 45 individuals. They receive weekly grocery deliveries. We included a cookbook early on because we wanted to make sure that the foods that we were providing were accessible, that folks knew what to do with what they were receiving. And we're now seeking expansion funds because we realized that this pilot group has been quite successful and has also opened our eyes to the greater need because transportation systems are so lacking in this area. I'm going to do the transition for Suzanne into the incarceration program because I think just as we realized that children needed healthy, accessible foods to thrive, we also realized that children had lost some of the supports that they were receiving through their school-based counselors to process and recover from experiences apart from their incarcerated parents. And I think as the pandemic continued and we noticed that we were having increased cases in our local facility, that was increasing anxiety for children. And so their inability to have regular conversations with parents, their inability to have in-person visits or virtual visits of any kind was really, making it even harder for kids to process that time away from incarcerated parents. So as Suzanne mentioned, that project had started prior to COVID, but I think we really doubled down on our collaboration at the community level to meet that need. And I'll let Suzanne jump in here.
Sure. So we worked with Resilience Beyond Incarceration program. That's Tricia Long from Lamoille County. And so she offered consultation to us. What really started it with us was the beginning, watching that film Downstream. So we made a community effort prior to COVID to just show that film to everyone and everywhere. And so we did that. We also then started meeting with a group of people, including the Northern State Correctional Facility, the Restorative Justice, the Probation Parole, Orleans County Sheriff's, and Family Services Division in Newport. And with that, we began educating ourselves. And so Tricia has come up a few times. We're educating the law enforcement at just about what children need. And so we've had two in training programs there. We've also had them come and talk to the school clinicians, guidance counselors, and teachers. Did that. Meanwhile, myself and Tricia and Barb Morrow from the Community Justice Center and folks from Umbrella are working with the facility director and identifying 5 fathers within the Northern State Correctional Facility to begin a program. And what that will be is that we will be assigning them a coach and working with them through the Strengthening Families material that RBI has to facilitate conversations that those fathers have with their children. And we will be doing that on video and then eventually in person. So those are our 2 projects that we've got going, and we're excited for anybody who might have some feedback for us. And we are going to be continuing trying to get funding for both of those.
How awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne and Samantha, for sharing. Really impressed with the work that you're doing. So thank you for sharing. I am going to move on. So goal 2, I think that was a great example of kind of work happening in the region and really inspiring to support families. We know that children are, only do as well as they in the environment in which they live. So moving on to goal 2, states families and communities play a leading role in children's well-being, and have invited Jen Fortman, who's a parent, the parent co-chair of the Families and Communities Committee, to share a little bit about the cool stuff that they're doing in their VCAP committee, the Families and Communities Committee.
Hello. As Beth just mentioned, my name is Jen Fortman. I am the parent of the family, or the parent co-chair of the Families and Communities Committee. Family engagement is important because the majority of individuals exist within the family systems. It creates a community and provides support and resources. Family engagement brings awareness to opportunities parents may not be knowledgeable of, and provides the opportunity to bring forward topics that are important to us as parents and caregivers, giving us a meaningful voice in the early childhood system. So specifically, being part of the Families and Communities Committee, it allows and encourages parents and families to ask questions. And like I just mentioned, it allows family voices to be heard where it matters most, which is in the decision-making process. As one parent stated, it allows her to feel less isolated and more of a valued member of the Vermont community, which is extremely empowering and validating. It gives us as parents the opportunity to be part of a group who understand the importance in raising healthy, supported families. it helps that the meetings are virtual and welcoming. So meeting us parents and caregivers where we're at any given time, whether it's meeting during nap or with our children jumping on our lap, asking for a snack during the meeting, like whatever it may be. The Families and Communities Committee and the BBF organization has done a wonderful job connecting with parents and providing opportunities such as being part of this summit today. So thank you for allowing me and other parents and caregivers to be here. And I'm looking forward to discussing more with some of you in our smaller breakout groups later in this meeting.
Thank you, Jen. You are doing such cool work with your committee, and it's great to have you and other parents and caregivers on with us today. I'm honored that you're making time for this and really appreciate it. So moving on to the next concentric circle, families sit in communities. And goal 3 states all children and families have access to high quality opportunities that meet their needs. We know that those opportunities show up in a range of things. And many of us are working in this realm to improve the quality and the accessibility of the services that children and family need. Today, we've invited Representative Teresa Wood to share one success that I bet many of us have heard of, and we want to celebrate the passage of H171. Teresa, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thank you, Beth. I'm so happy to be here, and I just wanted to extend our committee chair, Representative Pugh's regrets that she was not able to be here today. She's headed off on a well-deserved vacation. And I do just want to mention that what folks have been sharing about a vision for Vermont's children and families is really important. The success that we've had in the legislature is due in large part to the communication of that vision for Vermont families. And we did pass H171, which I think probably most people on the call are familiar with. It's called an act relating to childcare systems and financing. And it really is not about childcare systems and financing. It's really about things like reducing childhood poverty and increasing family well-being, increasing the positive outcomes for children in education, continuing to improve wages and benefits for our childcare workers, and paying our childcare providers more, and also strengthening Vermont's economy. That's really what H171 is all about. And although Vermont is doing fairly well when we compare ourselves to the rest of the country, I think people might be familiar with the Annie Casey Foundation had recently ranked Vermont 4th overall in the nation with regard to overall child well-being, making the biggest gains in the economic security area. But we have a long ways to go. And I think that H171 is certainly a piece of that. We've made some big strides. Families that make 150% of the current federal poverty level. And so for a family of 3, that'd be about $33,000. And for a family of 4, about $40,000. Those families will not, as this system is implemented, will not have a family co-payment. And we also increased the assistance level for middle income families. So a family of 4, for instance, previously would not have been eligible up to close to $93,000 in terms of annual family income. And now they will be, hopefully in October. And the bill also sets out expectations for new and revised information system, which is really critical in order to be able to achieve some of the things that we want to do. It's not very popular for people to invest in, and Vermont's information systems are woefully outdated, and the Bright Futures information system is no exception to that. So we are hopeful that that implementation of the new system will will be on time. And I really want to share exciting news around workforce development and support of workforce. And we have set aside a significant amount of resources for scholarships for current early childhood providers, scholarships for prospective providers, and a student loan repayment assistance program. This is really critical to help increase the number of people in the early childhood field, as well as to retain people who are currently there. We also have an unprecedented amount of federal funds coming in through through ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. And I think that one of the things that in the legislature we wanted to ensure was that we had input and participation from all of the stakeholders. And we just, we're talking about the importance of families being involved and providers being involved in the things that will impact them directly. And so we wanted to make sure that that will happen. And certainly BBF is playing a very significant role in doing that. And finally, we have a couple of studies that will assist us in looking towards the future, a future we've set out as a vision and a goal that no family would pay more than 10% of their family income towards childcare. And we are looking to get sufficient information about what the cost and how that might be financed in the future. So as we look to the future, we look at implementing some of these investments. We look at seeing what the impact is of the investments that we have already made. And we really hope to continue to work with all of the partners who are on this call. Now, none of this is done in the legislature without the assistance of people, all of who are represented here today. So thank you so much for all of the work that you've done, for your help in helping us move policy forward. And I'm really excited to think about the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And thank you to the work of your committee for all the work, which I can truly appreciate following the development of building that bill and all the advocates to get to that point. So look forward to the work ahead.
I did want to just mention, Beth, that we have a couple other members of the Human Services Committee here today. Representative Redmond and Representative Brumstead are here. And I didn't see other representatives, but if I missed you, just.
Oh, we lost you, Teresa. You unmute yourself. Yes, and if other representatives from the committee want to give a wave.
Sorry. Yes, I just realized there was an automatic mute going on there. So I just wanted, to mention that we have Representative Brumstead and Representative Redmond from the House Human Services Committee. And I believe I saw Representative Austin from House Ed, and I'm not sure if there's any other reps on, but just wanted to shout out to my fellow legislators as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, all of you. We recognize that the goals of the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan are lofty, right? And in some ways we can become overwhelmed with the complexity or the vision. And so it is important that we take stock, which is what we're doing today, and pausing to be able to identify the different pieces of it and the steps towards making the change that's needed. So thank you for sharing kind of the process of bill making to make the change that we want to. Now, goal 4 in the VCAP states that the early childhood system will be integrated, well-resourced, and data informed. That's the largest, the third tier of the image that we have up on the screen. We recognize that so much of the work toward goal 4 is behind the scenes to develop a strong data infrastructure, to enhance service delivery, systems building and outcome reporting. We've invited Miranda Gray, Interim Deputy Director for the Child Development Division, to share about a recent success in this area.
Oh, Miranda, you're muted.
All right, I thought I was on it this time. But thank you, Beth, and good afternoon, everyone. Francis Bacon said, "Begin doing what you want to do now. We are not living in eternity. We only have this moment, sparkling like a star in our hand and melting like a snowflake." It's my pleasure to celebrate Goal 4. The early childhood system will be integrated, well-resourced, and data-informed. Upon joining the Child Development Division, it was arranged that I could meet with partners to understand their roles, our connections, and shared visions. I had 1 week this spring where the statewide longitudinal data system, SLDS, was mentioned numerous times by numerous people. I was intrigued by the system that is designed to track supports children receive from preschool through high school, and quickly asked, is CDD a part of this? The answer was no. Our system does not allow us to connect. This led me to asking my staff, have we thought about how we could connect to this system as we're building our new IT platform? The excitement about exploring this connection by CDD staff was met with just as much enthusiasm by our partners at the Agency of Education and Building Bright Futures. Fast forward to today, the Agency of Education, BBF, and CDD have come together twice to begin developing a plan and process for creating a unique identifier to track longitudinal outcomes for children and families, and making that data publicly available through Vermont's Early Childhood Resource, Data, and Policy Center. The unique identifier will allow the state to begin tracking a child as soon as he or she receives any service from the Child Development Division. I'd like to give you an example of this future system. That's how I usually can put all these connections together. So we're going to go back to baby Mariah. Baby Mariah entered childcare when she was 10 weeks old, and her family qualified for subsidy. Behind the scenes at CDD and the Agency of Education, Mariah was assigned a unique identifier. At 18 months old, Mariah was referred to her local children's integrated system for speech services. At 5 years old, Mariah entered kindergarten, where her speech services had been reduced to monthly check-ins with the school's speech and language pathologist. Mariah scored well on her annual SBAC tests, grades 3 through 9th, and is now a high schooler. Because of the unique identifier, the state will be able to look back at what services Mariah received, when and where they were received, the impact they had on her individual outcomes, and compare her data to peers. Being able to review service and outcome data longitudinally will allow us to understand how comprehensive and integrated our early childhood system is, where there are gaps, and how the system is or isn't meeting the needs of children and families. While I might be fast forwarding time far too quickly, 10 weeks old to a senior, the fact is the state has been given an opportunity by the legislature and the administration to realize Goal 4 through their generous support and allocation of funds to build a new information system in the Child Development Division. This will take some time as our new system is being built in modules. That also affords us the time to continue having our collaborative meetings where we share what we are each working on and how we can continue building a common language, see where we have natural connections, and look for opportunities to pull other departments and divisions into the conversations as those entities upgrade their data systems. We have our sparkling star through the VCAP and a tremendous amount of energy by those I mentioned above and all of you today to realize the strategies that many of you set forth in the summit a year ago. And I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. So I recognize that we all play our unique roles in this system, and it takes all of us. It surely does. And so we want to give you a chance to share what successes you've seen, and we, small and large, in terms of progress towards the 4 goals outlined in the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. So we have, we want to take just a minute or two. I'm going to paste idea board link. Many of you who have been participating with us before may be familiar with idea boards. And I'm going to stop the screen share so you can navigate to the idea board and invite you to share your observation of progress toward and place it to the best of your ability under which VCAP goal you feel like it fits best.
For those of you who have used idea boards before, you can also vote or show additional support for each of these by giving the existing outcomes a thumbs up. To give you an example of some of the highest ranking accomplishments across the goals under All Children Have a Healthy Start, Everyone Eats program from the United Way's resource page is coming to the top of that list. Another is All Hands on Deck to keep schools and childcare open in Vermont, and really talking about cross-agency collaboration to support school nurses and leaders. As we move towards families and communities play a leading role. So goal 2 of the VCAP, some of the top there are families being involved in the Families and Communities Committee. So the fact that we've reached a goal of 51% families plus a range of other partners is truly a significant accomplishment there. As we move down to goal 3, all children and families have access to high quality opportunities that meet their needs. There were several accomplishments under this year. The one that we're seeing have one of the highest number of votes is the approval of an online real-time as permanent addition to the modality options for professional development in Vermont. Another is hazard pay program for childcare providers and under the workforce stabilization grants. The passage of H171, which focuses on family affordability and childcare and developing the early childhood education workforce. And then as we move to goal 4, some of the highest ranking ones are the redesign of the Bright Futures information system at the Child Development Division, as well as progress towards the unique identifier in really moving forward the vision of the state longitudinal data system.
So this idea board, thank you, Morgan, will be kept open. And if you want to add something, you can click on that on my screen. It's a green plus sign, and it will bring up this kind of online sticky note that you can write what progress you've seen us make over the last year.
All right, thank you, Beth, and thank you all. It's really interesting as the holders of the vision and the strategic plan to look back to you all to say, what do you see are the accomplishments? I think that we often take that very high level systems lens to the accomplishments, but this really allows us to document the impact of this network and to really be thinking strategically about where you all want to celebrate accomplishments at each layer of the infrastructure. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. It really is an incredible range of work. And I think Teresa said it as well. You know, we really do want to celebrate the small milestones and the accomplishments, but we know there's always work left to do. So thank you for being a part of it. And now I want to take us back to the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan and the process by which the BBF network, so all of the partners on this call, are building recommendations that eventually make it to the State Advisory Council for adoption. So at the beginning of the session today, Cheryl and I talked a little bit about the history of the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, and one unique component of the development of the 2020 iteration was funding from the preschool development grant that funded not only the updated VCAP, but also the 2020 Early Childhood Needs Assessment. And for me, and I think many of the partners on the call, this was a major catalyst in identifying the gaps, the needs in the early childhood system, and those were eventually transitioned and translated into the goals, the objectives, and strategies that we articulated in the 2020 VCAP. So I know these weren't necessarily some of the kind of larger strategic celebrations, but these were significant accomplishments across the entire network in this past year. The publishing of this needs assessment, the strategic plan, and then using those documents as the opportunity for how we think about what the needs of kids and families are and how we can prioritize those in the forms of recommendations for the following year. Another component that was really prominent in the early childhood needs assessment and in this year's iteration of the VCAP is the idea of using evidence and data to inform policy. And another exciting development under the preschool development grant was the inclusion of indicators in Vermont's early childhood action plan. So not just do we as a state have an early childhood strategic plan for how we move forward, but how are we monitoring the progress, the indicators, the outcomes of children and families. So alongside those two documents, we created Vermont's Early Childhood Resource Data and Policy Center. And within that policy center, and that can be found at vermontkidsdata.org, was the creation of a dashboard to monitor the VCAP. And so what we did was review every strategic plan that touched children and families in the state of Vermont, and we identified the top indicators to track progress towards these goals. And all of that can be found online again at Vermont's Early Childhood Resource Data and Policy Center at vermontkidsdata.org. And the next slide shows an example of what you can expect to find in the center. I apologize. So when you look at this center, again, given the name, you can expect to find resources as well as really the most up-to-date, high-quality data to inform policy. So there's Vermont-specific data, there's data from the National Survey of Children's Health, there's data from the state longitudinal data system. So for the first time, as you heard Miranda speak, BBF has partnered with the Child Development Division and the Agency of Education to put together the first look at the state longitudinal data system, which looks at early intervention data by Early Head Start and special education by Head Start programs. And as we move forward over the course of the year, you'll see additional indicators show up there. I know I mentioned the data dashboard a couple of minutes ago, but every single goal identified in the VCAP has indicators associated with it. And what you will see is either data that is publicly available or a placeholder to say, this is where we need additional data. And here are some of the limitations and things we need to think about to make sure that we have data to inform service provision and policy. You'll also see a tab with publications and reports, not just from Building Bright Futures, but also from all of our agency and community partners, as well as a host of national publications from early childhood partners. There's also a portal for, again, resources, but also the recordings of research presentations, webinars, and eventually in the next couple of years, early childhood grand rounds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of months in the BBF network. And then the final piece is that people can actually go and request for more information to be on there. So we'll also make sure you have a link to be able to report data gaps and policy priorities. Next slide, please. All right, so, again, we're excited to celebrate the Early Childhood Needs Assessment, the 2020 VCAP, and all of the different components by which we have these collective resources where we can reaffirm our articulated vision. But now I want to talk about some of the actual network functions and the process that we use annually. So Building Bright Futures, again, is responsible for upholding this strategic plan and the vision for Vermont's early childhood system. We do this by engaging a range of partners, usually over 450 any given year, of cross-sector leaders that come together. It starts with regional councils and identifying the most concrete barriers and gaps of what's impacting children and families right now. These priorities are then presented at a forum similar to today's, but also over the course of the year through VCAP committee meetings and state advisory council meetings. So as we think about our regional councils, what I want folks to remember is we have a network of 12 regional councils that extends across the entire state of Vermont. These partners that are coming together not only serve as advisors to the rest of the network, and they monitor the needs of the early childhood system, but they're also within that region serving as the go-to resource for the early childhood system. So they are the partners on the ground that are making the connections and helping with system navigation and responding to fill gaps, building capacity of those regions, identifying the regional needs and executing regional action plans. And most importantly, they provide opportunities to empower and elevate both regional and family voice. The next layer of our infrastructure, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now, are the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees. So at this point, there are 4 key goals in our strategic plan, And there are 7 action plan committees that are consistently monitoring those goals over time. So again, they're guided by the goals and objectives in the VCAP, but these groups come together on a monthly basis for the most part over the course of a year using work plans, and they're really focused on issue-specific state level work. I think one thing that's really critical for folks to know is that across these 7 VCAP committees, all of the partners who attend are volunteer members, right? From the folks who are coming to participate in those meetings to the folks leading those meetings. I want to very quickly say thank you to each of our public and private volunteer co-chairs. So I think it's really important to say thank you for both your skill, but also the thoughtful leadership that you bring to each of these tables, the convening of really difficult and challenging conversations on a monthly basis. So just a very warm public thank you to Becky Millard, Cheryl Wilcox, Crystal Michaud, Erin Roche, Heather Madison, Hillary Watson, Jen Fortman, Lauren Smith, Lynn Robbins, and Tanya LaChapelle. Beth and I cannot thank you enough for your leadership in this area, and your commitment to creating change is absolutely incredible, and we cannot thank you enough. We as facilitators of very large meetings know what it takes to bring partners together and really know how much time that goes into this that is volunteer. So we really appreciate your time. The other thing I want to say about these committees is that they are open to the public. The majority of these committees are really looking for additional members. So if there are topics, as we talk today, in the small groups that you're interested in hearing more about, we will make sure that you are connected to the right people. You can reach out to me, to Beth, or any of the people that we just mentioned today to be engaged in different levels of this work. So we talked a little bit about the regional councils and the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees, and the final layer of this infrastructure is the State Advisory Council. So as regional councils identify priorities, they then bring this information to VCAP committees, who then create and formulate formal recommendations to the State Advisory Council for adoption. Those recommendations then get printed in the annual How Are Vermont's Young Children and Families report, but they also get presented at the State of Vermont's Young Children and Families, and are often presented to the legislature across a range of different presentations depending on what is prioritized. So where are we in this cycle today? As we're thinking about our Early Childhood Action Plan and the annual cycle, I want folks to remember that today resets that cycle for the year. And I'm going to have you pause the screen share for just a second to say thank you to all of the partners, not just our VCAP leaders, but all of the committees who've come together over the course of the year and taken time to review the accomplishments that you just saw in the idea board. But as we're thinking about resetting our cycle, I want to transition it to one of Building Bright Future's regional managers, Ellen, to show you the most up-to-date information from each of our regional councils on the priorities of needs and children and families statewide. So Ellen, I want to invite you to screen share, have Beth screen share the regional council priorities.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to talk to you about what the regional councils have been seeing in our priorities. And as Morgan said, this is where this all starts. For the past few months, Morgan and Beth have traveled virtually through the state to all of our council meetings and talked with us about the roles of the regional councils and what we're seeing as biggest priorities, like barriers and gaps that we think we need to address as soon as possible, knowing that these are big issues. So as you can see, these are the ones that have been risen to the top. And there's a lot of similarities, such as the early childhood workforce development. And that's not just childcare, that's the whole early childhood system is struggling to find workforce. So 7 out of the 12 regional councils have that as one of the main priorities, but there's also some differences about what's happening in the regions and some slight variations. And so I wanted to share a quick thing that 2 of my councils have been working on. Shout out to Courtney McKegg, you're on this call, so I'm going to talk about what you're working on. But we have noticed that we're struggling with connections. Families are struggling to connect with each other and find these high quality experiences. So the Springfield and Northern Windsor and Orange counties, along with Courtney McKegg at the Mount Scottney Hospital, have been looking at playgroups as a way to help support families getting connected. And so we're using playgroups as well as the Strengthening Families model to really make sure that these are high quality playgroups and support families beyond just coming together to play, but also to support families connecting, learning about child development, and making sure that these are great experiences. It's brought together so many different partners like healthcare, childcare. We've looked at national resources. We've looked at best practices. We've talked to families. And as many of you know, the Upper Valley is very porous. And so people in New Hampshire come to Vermont, people in Vermont go to New Hampshire. So really looking at bringing the systems together from across states. So we're working on getting more playgroups, but also making sure that we have a guide that we can hand out to other areas saying this is what a high quality playgroup looks like, and using like the Parent-Child Center's guide as well. So really cool stuff. That's just a short snippet. But I just want to say I'm super proud to be part of the regional councils and to really make sure that you guys all know what's going on in the regional network, and feel free to reach out to us. We really love talking about the work we're doing. So I'm going to hand it back to Morgan now.
Thank you, Ellen. And you know, we're really excited to have shown this regional council priority map. It's something that we updated during COVID and want to continually do at least every 6 months, because what we recognize is that the priorities may change, and we want to make sure that not only is our map changing, but our strategies in the VCAP need to be up to date. We need to be focused on what's happening across the state, identifying how things change, looking at trends and patterns in what we're seeing across the state and where there's really unique variation. So thank you, Ellen, for representing our regional council network. And you know, one of the things that we've really tried to do over the course of this last couple of years is be as transparent as we can in our process for how we identify and develop priority areas and recommendations as a BBF network. And this map has really been so powerful to see in one place what the work of our regional councils looks like, and how we as a state advisory council and VCAP committees can use this information and connect with the regional leaders to say, what data do we need? What additional stories do we need to be able to tell and elevate? So thank you. I want to transition back to walking through a very concrete example of how a regional council priority gets elevated and turns into policy, a program, or having this kind of long-standing impact on Vermont's early childhood system. So based on the SAC priorities and regional council priorities from last year, the example I'm going to give is on childcare workforce development. So last year, 6 out of 12 of our regional councils identified childcare workforce development as one of the top 2 priorities during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're following along on the childcare workforce example to my left, we see that early childhood needs assessment identified workforce as a challenge, as did 6 out of 12 of the regional councils. That information then went to our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees, specifically the Early Learning and Development Committee. And that group developed a series of policy recommendations under the title, Recognizing Vermont's Early Care and Education System Workforce as Essential. And you can look at the How Vermont's Young Children and Families report to look at each of those recommendations. But these were also recommendations reflected in Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan. So for those of you who are not as familiar with that document, there's a goal, a series of objectives, and a series of strategies. And this specific component of early childhood workforce appeared in almost every single goal and across multiple objectives and strategies. And we can talk about those a little bit more in our small groups. So once it went to our VCAP committees, the State Advisory Council then adopted those recommendations. They were printed in the annual How Vermont's Young Children and Families report and presented at the State of Vermont's Young Children and Families. The recommendations were also presented to the House Committee on Human Services and the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare by the Building Bright Futures Executive Director, myself, but also by our advocacy partners at Let's Grow Kids and others. At the same time as these recommendations were finalized, they were used to adopt and affirm H-171 as well as budgeting priorities. And the primary outcome of this work over time was the passage of H-171, which included investments in childcare workforce development. So again, I know this is a celebration that we are had a time and time again, but really wanting to say thank you to all the partners who were involved in the important legislation around H-171. And we look forward to really working together to execute the systems analysis as a key part of H-171. So I hope that that example illustrates how we start with evidence and data and regional councils and make our way up this, this stepped approach to get to an outcome with our decision makers in the state of Vermont. So now we're going to transition to a discussion of the 5 priority areas that were developed last year at the VCAP Summit and transition into small groups. And I really hope that folks will reference our regional map, our regional priority map, as you transition into these small groups and think about the needs of kids and families.
Thanks, Morgan. All right. So are you all ready? We're going to move you into your virtual space via some breakout rooms. I remember the first time we did this, you know, whatever, when COVID started, it felt like Star Trek. It still kind of feels kind of wild, but we're going to beam you into a new space, and you're actually going to get to choose which group you'd like to go to. So what I'm showing you are the 5 small groups, which I will just briefly go over, and then we'll open up those rooms and you'll get to choose which room you want to go to. You'll have about a half hour, a little bit more in those small groups. And we've identified small group facilitators, matching a VCAP chair with a BBF staff member who will move us through this process so that you can identify some help us inform what the next steps are around policy recommendations. So the small groups that we have based on the 2020 recommendations that the State Advisory Council developed was the A is COVID impacts on family economic stability and mental health. So reflecting back on what Samantha and Suzanne shared with us, and Shel Wilcox will be in that group as well around mental health and family safety and stability. Group B is recognize and address chronic inequities in early childhood systems. Group C is family voice, stronger systems, and important for families and communities will be in there with Ellen. D is stabilize and sustain the early childhood workforce. So learning more about the work of the Early Learning and Development and Professional Preparation and Development Committees, doing work there. And then E is evolve our data systems to address gaps. And so that is talking about some of the progress we've made around data systems that Miranda mentioned, as well as some of the updates to the CDD information system. So Heather and Dora will be there. So what I'm going to do is I should note that those who we've asked to lead groups have already been assigned. Everyone else, I'm going to open these groups. And you will be able to select which group you'd like to go and make your way there. And I will send you a message in about a half hour, and we will come back together. So I hope you will be able to make your way. And those who have questions, feel free to speak up if you need some help. I'm going to stop the screen share.
Beth, this is Lee Lauber. I have no idea how you make your way there, so could you tell me?
Okay, which group do you want to go to, Lee?
I want to go to the workforce.
Okay, I will work on that.
Thank you.
I'd like to do the same, and I'm not sure.
I don't know how to get there either.
All right.
Either.
I will assign. I don't know if there was a pop-up that happened on the screen, but that's all right. All right, so I got, who else is needed?
Elizabeth Christie.
That's not to overwhelm you. I don't have a pop-up either to go to Morgan's group, recognize and address chronic.
Okay. Hang on,
Sorry.
I'm gonna do one at a time. So Elizabeth
Okay.
Christie, which group did you want? Workforce?
Same as Lee's, workforce.
Okay. All right, and Teresa?
I'll go to the data.
Okay, great. Who else is there? Sonia, which group did you want? I didn't hear you. Say that again. Workforce. I'm reading lips.
You're good. Workforce.
Jessica, you wanted workforce as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, we're getting through this list. Who else is there? Feel free to unplug. Yeah, Scott.
Mitigating COVID impacts.
Great. Thanks for your patience. All right, who else do we have who needs assignment into a small group? Hey, Brian, what would you like?
E, please. Thank you.
D?
E.
B?
E as in eggs.
E as in eggs. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right, and Rick?
Workforce.
Great. All right. Who else needs some support? Hi, Kelly. What would you like?
B, please.
Okay. Oops.
This is Brooke from Congressman Welsh's office. I'm okay to be put wherever you think would be most useful for me to listen in on.
I'm going to put you with the B, inequities.
Sounds great.
All right. Who else?
That's
Mary
Wendy.
Beth. Hi, Mary Beth. What would you like?
Hi, could I have group A, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Why? Hang on. I am having trouble finding you in the unassigned. Why is that? That is funny. Dan, what would you like while I find Mary Beth?
I'll go into D or wherever you need some folks.
All right. Mary Beth, for some reason, your thing is not showing up. Why is that?
Huh, interesting.
I'm going to put you in the waiting room and bring you back in, and maybe it'll pop up.
Okay, great.
Beth, it's Wendy Hubbard.
Yeah.
Could you send me to A if it's not overflowing?
No, of course. All right, there you are, Mary Beth. And you wanted to, remind me, you wanted to go to
A, please.
A as well.
And
Great.
thank.
All right, anyone else, everyone who?
Yeah, I'm group B, please.
A?
B.
B, great.
Beth, I do apologize. I had to step away to go into a classroom.
No problem.
And so I missed the past 5-10 minutes or so.
Okay. We're just dividing into some small groups.
Okay.
One is around kind of supporting families' access to basic needs and mental health. One is around equities and access to early childhood services with a focus on children with special health care needs. There's another group around workforce stabilization and supports, and one on data.
I would like to join the mental health accessibility one.
Mental health. Okay,
yes,
great.
Please.
There you go.
Hi, Beth. Michelle Johnson, mental health as well, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
in your reflecting on your small groups, what was most exciting about the conversation that you heard? Or what was most exciting about the prospect of the changes that you feel like are needed at this point? So you can reflect on that and share in the chat bar as you're moved.
Anyone from Group B want to share out verbally what you were most excited about as we talked about equity in early childhood education?
Hey, this is Amy Murphy. I just wanted to say I appreciated the conversation. I mean, there were, different points of view and perspectives, and we all, I think, could agree on what we were ultimately seeking. And I just thought it was a great discussion.
Thank you, Amy. Any others? We have time for a few if you want to share what excites you about the discussion or the prospect of what the discussion of what you feel like we are gathering around to make change in the next year.
This is Janet with Vermont AUIC, and it was exciting to have so many people willing and excited and interested in talking about workforce development within early childhood education and within the early childhood field more broadly. And I think there was lots of engagement and enthusiasm around sort of the scholarships and the loan repayment and sort of the pipeline work that's being done in the field right now. But there was also a really robust discussion around retention and what does it take to have these be jobs that people can actually build their careers in and get the compensation that they need, and thinking about compensation in terms of the full package, in terms of thinking about health benefits and retirement and paid time off, and other ways that people can be able to get their lives and organized and give themselves the space that they need so they can show up and bring their best for kids every day. So it was I thought it was a sort of a robust and powerful discussion around recognizing the depth, I think, of the need and the importance of making those investments, and then starting to strategize around how do we what can we take advantage of. Sorry, there's my dog.
Thank you, Janet. Very excited to hear more. Any other reflections from other groups? I appreciate what's happening in the chat bar. It's hard to keep track. We will capture those. We will write up a summary of our gathering. So thank you for sharing. But any other verbal reflections on small groups and what excited you about those discussions?
This is Cynthia Green, and I'll just share. It's really exciting. Kudos to the Data and Evaluation Committee and all the work that the legislature and UDF have done. I think it's exciting to think about new data systems that can actually collect and report out, and the data sharing and governance work. And I'm really excited for the early childhood field to be able to use data and have access to it in more fluid fashions. So thanks to everyone who's been part of that.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anyone else may have written in the chat bar but wants to share them verbally too?
Well, the rundown in our group was basically, the family. The families don't have a voice. They want to get them onto our committee, but a lot of people don't have time or cannot afford to take an hour out of their time. They're just dropping their kids off. We had one parent that came on and spoke, and their hands are tied. There is nobody around anywhere in the facility where they're at. I have a dad who gets his child and a single dad, but yet he doesn't meet the qualifications because he has the child during the summer, but she lives with the mom, but they got joint custody, but he's still gone for 45 hours for work, just to work 40 hours. What is he going to do with his child? So men are not getting equal looked at in considerations because there are a lot of single moms out there, but the children go to their desk and they're not getting as much help as the females are. And it's sad, but it's true. In the area that I work at and live in, I see it all the time. And I'm a single mom. I know what it's like to struggle. I know my community. I know the people around. So being able to get the information yourself and building a relationship with the family, then you can tell whether or not if you can approach them with the needs that they need, because not a lot of parents and people are open to, maybe it's their culture, maybe it's they're embarrassed, they don't want to admit, but I listen to the children that come in and out of my home. So I'm aware of what's going on. I have pamphlets out in the mudroom. It's there. I'm not bringing it up, but it's there so they can discreetly take the information and the resources as they walk out the door, and nobody will know. But I'm also here to help them and advocate for them.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing. Appreciate it. One last reflection. Someone who would like to share verbally, and what has been shared in the chat is wonderful. Thank you. Great. Morgan, do you want to finish up?
Yes, thank you all for coming and taking the time to be with us today. I can't believe we're actually on time, so very nice work to each of our facilitators. You know, one of the things that I want to say thank you to my entire team about is that we've really worked hard to articulate the role of Building Bright Futures and this network, as well as the entire infrastructure of the early childhood system. And not only have we tried to articulate that, but we've worked to make sure that you all understand the role of our regional councils, of the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees, and our state advisory council. And today's meeting was the first time that we have gone start to finish to show you exactly how each of those layers of the network work together to come up with policy recommendations that then come to our legislative partners and decision makers to really be working on some concrete law and policy. So we hope that you saw that line today. We hope that you'll come to us at each layers of these infrastructure, or each layer of the infrastructure, to be engaged in the work of regional councils, right? To really be identifying the needs and challenges of kids and families on the ground, and joining us for our action plan committees to say, okay, we now know the needs and barriers. What do we do next? And how do we transition from needs and barriers into policy recommendations? And then at the state advisory council level to say, what is the highest level strategy that we need to be doing across our early childhood system to make sure that our children have what they need, to really make sure that our system is integrated, comprehensive, continuous, high quality, and that it's equitable, accessible, and will improve outcomes for each and every child in Vermont from the prenatal period to age 8 and their families. So thank you so much for being here today. In terms of next steps, we do want to invite you to check out our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. The full document can be found on the BBF website, but also in our new Vermont Early Childhood Resource Data and Policy Center. It's much easier to think about it as vermontkidsdata.org. So please go to vermontkidsdata.org. We also invite you to each of our virtual tables. Some of them will be returning in person over the course of the next year. The State Advisory Council will not. So this meeting for those of you who have participated in this network for quite some time, has gone from being a table where maybe 20 to 30 partners attend consistently to being a meeting of over 90 people consistently. And today's meeting had a little over, at any one time, I believe, around 112 participants. So just to show you all that you are a part of a very robust and committed and passionate network of early childhood stakeholders who really care about what happens to our kids and families. So thank you so much for being here today. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.